Hey everyone, I'm Kelley Sanabria. I'm here with Maria Soyka today, and we are creating a follow-up to the pop-up think tank that we had 2 weeks ago now. It was on women's wisdom at work, and if you have not seen the original interview, we'll put a link in the description so that you can go watch that if you want. Basically, we had this interview, and during that process, we asked 40 participants to share what they were liking, wishing, and wondering as we went through this pop-up think tank together. And so today we want to talk about that. And last time we were together, Maria was interviewing me and she read my bio. So this time I want to make sure that you get to know a little bit more about her. So, Maria Soyka is a facilitator, coach, and sociologist based in Lisbon, Portugal, helping people reconnect to their voice, self-expression, and sense of aliveness in a rapidly changing world. And if you know me, you know that Maria is helping me to do this right now in my own life. She also serves as the lead facilitator at Pop Up Think Tank, where she designs and leads fast-moving conversations that help people feel seen quickly, think more deeply together, and move ideas into action. Her work sits at the intersection of human connection, community building, leadership development, and creative expression. Over the past decade, Maria has coached thousands of learners and early career professionals. She's led high-performing teams, built community-centered programs, and facilitated experiences focused on confidence, belonging, and communication. At the center of Maria's work is a simple belief: everyone has something meaningful to express, and the right room can change what becomes possible. So, welcome, Maria. You want to start us off?
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, this is a fun change of pace. So, yeah, for the like, I wish, I wonder, we're going to talk a bit about what participants who came to our think tank liked. And so, where this is coming from is basically from Stanford. There's design thinking that adults learn best when they have some time to process and do it privately. So I wish, I wonder, and that's a part of Pop-Up Think Tank's format. So one of the themes that came through was about polarity as a legitimate framework, which you taught us all about in the session. So the one okay, there were a couple. So I like that I find myself liking the idea that tension can be read as information, not simply treated as a problem to remove. And I mean, you explained that concept so beautifully in the last session. Someone also said, I like the idea that polarity is a strength and that if we understand, study, and leverage this, we will strengthen our teams. Are there others that you want to highlight, Kelley?
Yeah, so a couple people said, someone said, I like the idea of polarity. It feels like a legitimate framework, and positioning women in that frame feels like a great way to frame the conversation about female energy and intelligence. I like the idea of leading through conflict and polarities rather than feeling like it's something I need to manage or avoid. And I like the process of this pop-up. Also, the distinction of managing the polarities versus focusing on resolving a problem. So, a lot of people liked the polarity framework, which I was so happy about because we did, I mean, our interview was pretty short. And so, explaining that concept and being able to like get it through to people. So, I love that they said that the framework was legitimate. And it's funny because when people learn about polarities for the first time, there's like this moment that everyone has where they're like, oh, like that's what it's called. And they realize that they've been managing polarities their entire lives, right? Like if we think about work and rest, and as leaders, we hold both task and relationship. So there's just polarities everywhere. Like we're swimming in polarities all the time. But before we understand that these are both and situations and that they're not either or choices, we naturally will default to either or just based on like our upbringing and how education works and things like that. And we feel like we have to be decisive and pick a single direction. But when we teach polarities, we're naming this thing that people have experienced. And then as soon as you name it, people get to own it. And they get to go from having polarities happen to them and being subject to them to making them object. And then that's so empowering because they get language to use, they know what to call it, and they can work with the polarities and be intentional. And it's just a really powerful experience.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that like hearing you describe this, I had always heard it described as yin and yang, and the way that I hear you describe it is giving it a lot more accessible language that is appropriate in a workplace and like in more even academic environments too. So it creates like accessibility to a very, very, very ancient concept of yin and yang. And so in my experience, I think that facilitating, coaching, sales, community building, really all people work, is quite similar to dancing in the way that if you just show up with nothing to talk about or do and like no uncomfortable emotions, like if there's no tension, if there's nothing to express or discuss, there's really nothing to work with. Like, so actually showing up with opposing points of views is often where the most beautiful works of art can come from. So, like, if something that you talked about in the session was being like a calm and related person. So, like, what I get from that is being calm enough to show up to create that day is what allows for the possibility of that innovation, really. So, like years ago, actually, I worked with this social dance trainer in Colorado, and a lot of what we worked on was around social dancing and the polarities within that. And so, truly, like sometimes the best dance comes from when there's two very different opposing viewpoints, ways of expressing, ways of moving your body, and when these two polarizing people come together, like that's when the dance can actually be the most beautiful and interesting because they can balance each other. So anyway, I think that the mature version of that, as you get more into how polarities feel for you, is like in environments where you have to speak with a lot of people, it's like knowing who you're speaking with and then kind of regulating up and down to know what the interaction means. So, like, if I'm with a super hype person, maybe it's my opportunity to be more grounded and like the one who's taking notes or like bringing us down to earth. But then sometimes people give me that gift where they're the more grounded person and I have the chance to be very excited. So, um, yeah, and I think ideally over time you just kind of naturally attract who balances your work in a way that's really energizing to both of you.
First of all, I love how creative you are. Like, I don't know if people know that about you. You're like musical and you sing and dance and you just like this beautiful soul. I love how you're naming exactly what we were talking about in the original interview, like the women's wisdom, the emotional attunement to be able to sense what's going on and then to have the choice to regulate up and down and just the amount of awareness that you bring into your work, the amount of self-awareness and regulation that you bring into your work as a facilitator is amazing. Which is a perfect segue to the second theme that we got when people wrote in and told us what they liked about the conversation. And that was, by the way, there were four themes. So we're on theme two. That was about how we framed emotions as a workplace intelligence and not a liability. So here were some of the comments that people wrote in. They said, I like the power that women have to establish psychological safety when we feel balanced in the feminine and masculine realms. I love the idea of calm as contagious, co-regulation. I like that we're normalizing emotions. That to me is like, I'm just going to pause there. That's wild. Like that we have to normalize emotions because it's just part of being a human being, right? It's such a human experience to have emotions. I like the recognition of emotional strengths as workplace strengths. I like the idea of not pathologizing every emotion, but instead seeing their unique value. I like the idea that we are uniquely equipped to manage big emotions, and that can be an asset to our workplaces. What do you think?
Yeah, so what I really liked about our session, honestly, is that it kind of goes to say, like we were demonstrating, that when you have the courage to share how you feel in a way that you can help others understand, then that often gives other people the freedom to do the same, and it prevents us from getting in this stuck feeling and like staying in an unproductive tension where we can't really share ourselves. So when people can express themselves in relation to other people, whether it's like sharing ideas about a topic or sharing experiences that you've had or emotions that you're feeling, it's okay for us to affect each other if it's all going toward the truth of how we feel and a common goal that hopefully might come about from that. And so, like, if we're going from this like everything is solved kind of standpoint, there isn't a lot of momentum in that. So, like, if there's no momentum, then what can we even like what are we even solving for? And so I think the opposite of embracing the the opposite of embracing the tension is embracing this stagnancy, which creates a lack of action, lack of relationship, lack of forward movement, which could be like perpetuating fear. So I feel like it's okay for me to say this because I'll admit, like, I have spent years that I'm not, super proud of, like in certain times, but imagining things versus doing them. And so but where we actually build confidence and relationships is when we see ourselves actually in the world and outside of our imagination.
Yeah, I love that. The idea that tension isn't always a bad thing. It gives us creative energy, it gives us forward momentum. There's always wisdom in the resistance, as my teachers say. Um, I also really like that these comments talked about the calm is contagious. And we talked about co-regulation during that original interview and that our nervous systems are not isolated and our nervous systems actually respond to each other. So when a leader can stay regulated under pressure, her team's nervous systems will respond to that. You can choose to not escalate. You can settle. And what a massive gift for any leader to be able to give to their team. So I want for the executives who are watching this to understand that this is this is the operating system of a high performance individual brain that enables a high performing team. Google spent years researching what makes teams perform. I think it was called Project Aristotle. It gets quoted a lot, but the psychological safety came out as the number one predictor. So it wasn't talent, it wasn't strategy, it wasn't process, it was psychological safety. What creates that? The capacity to read the room, like we were talking about earlier, to be able to hold tension without collapsing, without freaking out, to be able to regulate ourselves under pressure. So I'm super excited. There's actually so much more happening and coming out in leadership literature and leadership education about this right now. And I think there's a ton of potential to reduce some suffering and to help folks have a better experience at work.
Yes, being calm sounds very nice.
Right? Why are we not doing this?
Imagine that. So the third theme that came through from what people liked from our session was the energy of being centered and seen. So some of the comments were the way that people are being centered and celebrated, meaning that's what somebody liked from the session. Somebody shared, I like that we're focusing the conversation on how we can celebrate what women bring to the table as a strength and something less about what we need to change. Kelley also got some praise about her presence being upbeat, optimistic, encouraging, and overall, there was appreciation for women supporting women in the session. So I think that is Pop-Up Think Tank doing its best. So there was a lot of value from being centered and seen. And this matters because honestly, like if you're just taking whatever your algorithm spit at you today between LinkedIn, Instagram, news headlines, you could have a very negative interpretation of the world versus going to a session like this, which is actually made of very real people, people in my network and Kelley's network who are interested in the company, whatever it is. um, discussing a topic and who does work on this like a regular basis, and then discussing a topic in relation to people who you've never met, it actually opens up a whole new reality that there's actually quite a lot of very kind, thoughtful people who want each other to feel important. And we don't have to go around slicing and dicing ourselves to fit into some mold that we think that we're supposed to be. Because actually, I really do like the expression born an original, but insist on dying a copy. Because the more that we can preserve or create environments that help the originals to express themselves and feel important in relation to others in real time, I think the better. And that's what's been very impressive to me about the format of pop-up think tanks, in my experience so far. But yeah, I'd be curious your take, Kelly.
Yeah, I do love the fact that Pop-Up Think Tank has this wonderful ability to get the wisdom from the room and get people's voices in the room. It does it so beautifully, and like the technology too, the way that yeah, it's just so seamless and so beautifully facilitated. So I do love the format of the mastery of being able to get people's thoughts and original ideas. So I had a mix of emotions when I read these comments. So I was really happy that you could see that the people writing in were so happy to be seen and celebrated. And they were happy that we were naming women's wisdom, right? We were talking about what that is, what does it mean in the workplace, what makes women unique. Um, but then there was almost a sadness in it for me because I felt like the level of happiness that we saw is symptomatic of the fact that we're not seen and recognized for this, and that it's not labeled a leadership skill and that it's not valued. Um, so I kind of, it just made me wonder, like, oh, I wonder, like, even in myself, if there's this, like, maybe a subconscious kind of longing for these traits that are often held against us to be appreciated, like emotionality, for example. So I really like that Pop-up Think Tank doesn't just put someone in front of the room with like all the answers. It's not just like a one way. It takes the answers out of the room. We're reading the answers as they come in. That was such a fun experience to get to see like what is everyone thinking? Like what's the live feedback? And then we got to be with them again and then we broke out again. It was just so cool. Um, so I love that there's something really special about doing that because it positions the people in the think tank as the knowledge holders rather than being like the recipients of the knowledge. So it's not like they're getting taught to the whole time. And I think that's what's part of creating so much energy in the think tanks. And that's one thing that, like, when I was telling people about mine, I'm like, you have to come see this format because I've never been on a Zoom or video call that is so energizing. Like when you did yours, I was like, can we have a dance party? Like that's good. I'll get on camera and dance. Like it was so energizing. And I was like, this is magic, whatever you all have figured out, whatever Tim has created here. And you are now, lead facilitator for it is amazing. Um, okay, so our fourth and final theme was about the pipeline of women in leadership as a structural problem and not a personal one. So here are what folks said about that, and we'll kind of explain a little bit more about what we mean when we say that. So someone said, I like the fact that we can so clearly now discuss the pipeline challenges to more women in leadership, from basic needs to opportunity to programmed behavior. Someone else said, I like that we are actually having a real conversation about the barriers that keep women out of the room, which is a first start. So I really loved that first comment because it lays out like really the whole architecture of what we were saying, like very succinctly. Basic needs, opportunity, program behavior. And so those for me are like the three, maybe not the three, but at least three of the layers to the pipeline problem. So basic needs is, can this body function in this space, in this building? Does she have what she needs to show up fully? And this is where we talked about menstrual equity, menstrual health, menstrual supplies, opportunity. So, is the door open? And if the door is not open, does she have someone in the room who can open it for her? And then program behavior. So, even if she has access, has she internalized the belief that she belongs? Does she hold the identity of a woman who belongs in that room? So the pipeline to women in leadership is it's not it's not leaking because women aren't qualified to do the job, right? It's leaking because the original pipeline and right, like the workforce was designed without women in mind at all three of those layers. And so I think if we're serious about fixing it, we have to work on all three. There's probably more, but those are the three that we kind of talked about and discovered in our session.
Yeah, well, thanks for illuminating that for us in the session and again now. And I said it in the session, but I'll say it again now. How amazing that we get to have the privilege to even just be thinking about leadership. That, you and I and a lot of other people have taken leadership courses, and we get to talk about this with our friends, and that it's our responsibility with those who we work with directly in more formal work environments, along with someone who we're just meeting at a kiosk. How are we uplifting the people in our path? So, in my eyes, it's beyond the formal coaching and facilitation work. It's really an everyday practice of paying attention to how you can make any woman's day and really see a leader emerging in every woman that you see. And the more comfortable that we are doing that, then the more others will become comfortable doing that. And it goes on and on and on. And so just to like give that a bit of an example, it makes me wonder of like what is the training environment? Like is the training environment these high stakes kinds of coaching, facilitation settings, or like when you're about to have like a very difficult conversation in a high stakes environment, or maybe also the training ground is being quite patient for the 20-year-old female barista whose first day it is on the job. And how are we encouraging to her that she should take the time she needs because we want her to do a good job in this job. And it's okay if she doesn't know how to use the machine yet because we're here for her. And it's allowing her to get what she needs from that job so that she can take it everywhere she needs to from there. And so, as I see it, a good leader is elevating those who she passes in her path. And it's not only limited to work on your computer in your business, it happens everywhere. And so, it's in the breakout room of the think tank, sharing dumbbells at the gym, or being at the one at the coffee shop who's going to let the barista take her time to learn the job that day. And maybe it's the nicest customer she'll ever meet. So, that was just quite the honor of having you on that session to take time that we were allowed to even ideate about women in leadership, because to me, it's like each day is a new opportunity to extend that invitation to who crosses our path.
Yeah, it definitely was a privilege to have that interview, to be asked to do that interview, and to work with you throughout this whole process. I love what
Aw.
we are hearing from folks and what we're creating, and yeah, it's just awesome.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much. And just to reiterate what we just did, we think that women's wisdom is iterating. So getting reflections on what we know, what we thought we knew, becoming accountable to other people's responses. And so this is us responding to what we liked that other people liked so that we are not in a void because this was a discussion with 40 other people. So we think that it's a myth to think that you're up against the world because we talked about this and we had at least 40 other people in the conversation with us. And we hope that you'll continue, you, whoever you are continuing to be in the conversation with us.